Thank you all for joining us tonight. It's my pleasure as president of the ACCP to welcome Baron, representing the Chiropractic Defence Council, to talk to us this evening at what really is a fairly crucial moment in our profession's history, particularly here in Australia, as we face some significant curtailment upon our scope of practice and our ability to treat children as is appropriate. Fortunately, we've had some strong supporters of our position, including the CDC. And tonight is about hearing through Baron, the CDC's plans for how chiropractic can be supported, enhanced, and retain its scope of practice in Australia. So I'd like to hand over to Baron now and let him talk about the various issues facing us in Australia and what the CDC is able to contribute.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Dr. Keel. I appreciate the opportunity and time. And thank you, everybody, for taking some time on your evening to kind of listen to me explain really the climate, where things are at. I'm going to give you a lot of detailed information tonight so that you're really up to speed on kind of how we got here and what the plan is moving forward. This particular platform that we're doing the webinar on, obviously you guys don't see yourselves on the screen. You won't be able to orally communicate through the feature, but I'm going to encourage you to use the Q&A feature that's down on the bottom of your screen. Feel free to ask. I'll be monitoring those questions. I want to make sure everyone has their questions answered. You may want to wait until midway or near I get to the end, because I'll likely answer a lot of questions just in the natural information that I'm sharing. But I do want to give you an opportunity to ask any specific questions that you have, and I'll do my best to answer those throughout this presentation. So just to make sure that everyone's on the same page, my name is Baron Hoig. I am not a chiropractor. I have been in the chiropractic industry for 27 years, served the majority of that in the United States. I own clinics. I've done consulting with chiropractors. I served as the executive director of the Ohio State Chiropractic Association, which would be a smaller version of the ACA. And I did that for 6 years. I worked with our national organizations for about 5 to 6 years on a number of projects dealing with chiropractic. But in 2016, I started my organization, OneChiropractic. And in 2021, we created the project of the Chiropractic Defense Council. God's timing was perfect. That was right. We created it right before COVID really got ridiculous with vaccine mandates, but that was really what put us on the map, was defending chiropractors' rights to choose when it came to vaccines. And that's how we ended up in Australia, was no one was really fighting and defending your guys' rights to be able to practice without being vaccinated. So we were very aggressive. You may have heard of us during that time doing that work. So we've been in Australia since 2022, looking at the environment of how chiropractic sat. Our mission is to protect the rights of practicing chiropractors all over the world. So as the COVID mandates started resolving and lifting, we still have about 4 cases that we're defending where the government is going after chiropractors that were not vaccinated during that time. We're very optimistic about those cases, but they are still going. But we're very successful at defending and allowing people to continue to practice. But as those mandates started kind of diminishing, we started looking at the landscape of Australia, and 2 major things came out. One of them was the censorship issues of how AHPRA has really restricted how you guys can communicate chiropractic. The other issue was this pediatric policy that at that time had been instated in 2019. So we really started doing some digging and looking at the reality of why that policy was there, considering there was really zero evidence to show any danger associated to chiropractic with children of any age, let alone 2 and under. And as we kept digging, it was a bit more frustrating for us, looking from the outside, coming in, trying to understand why there would be any regulatory body that would put any type of restriction without the basis of a complaint. But it just really showed, again, it was a targeted attack against chiropractic. Now, we really started asking a lot of questions. We work very closely with the ACA, and what I mean by that is we're communicating with them regularly to find out if they have a perspective that maybe we don't know, or they may have some history that we don't know, to really try to understand why things are the way they are before we create any kind of strategy or plan to go forward. What we found at that time, obviously, this particular attack, the very first attack against chiropractic, actually happened in 1975. And there's been another one, I think, in the early to mid 2000s. And then obviously this one in 2019 that led to an actual policy. But we all know it came from a video that was on Facebook. And it created a big stir. FOSUM and their medical establishment created a lot of noise. So we're being told that that policy was created by the chiropractic board as an attempt to shut up that particular segment of the population. But they didn't think the policy was really that restrictive to chiropractors because the way it was worded, that it was 2 and under and no high velocity, low amplitude adjustment, because the average chiropractor probably wouldn't use a technique that would fall into that high velocity, low amplitude. However, there are techniques. Activator would be considered that. There are Gonstead techniques that would be considered that. So it's just ridiculous. Again, without a complaint, without any evidence of harm, they're putting in some policy just because of the political pressure and the media pressure that they were receiving. So that was a concern for us of that any regulatory body would create policy around fear rather than principle, or not even principle, but evidence to support the position. So we had been approached by an organization called PCS, Patrons of Chiropractic Science, with an idea of what if we went after the government with a restraint of trade case. Australia actually had a precedent on this with cattle workers. They were successful at going against the government and winning, and they got $400 and some million once they proved that the government had restricted access to something. I don't know all the merits of that case, but it was a successful case. So there was a precedent of this mindset that the government created a policy for no reason that affected dramatically an industry. So we started having our attorneys look into seeing, would we have a case? We gathered a bunch of data. We worked with a couple of software vendors. We looked to see, was there an actual drop in the care of 2 and under once the policy was instated? Long story short, we did see over a small sample that there was a drop. Extrapolated across the profession, it came to about $200 and some million of loss due to this policy. Now, those are all general numbers, but it was enough for our attorneys to say that there could be merit in the restraint of trade. So over the last year, we've been doing research, digging in, looking at the relationship between the Chiro Board and AHPRA and Safer Care Victoria and all of those types of things. In November of last year, as you're aware, the board actually pulled that policy of restriction. I don't have proof as to what the final thing was, but we were at that time talking very aggressively about our lawsuit. The ACA was lobbying the board pretty hard, letting them know that we were serious and we had support and would do it. And then the policy got pulled. So I believe it was because of the pressure of both the ACA and us and other groups that were writing letters in explaining that the policy was absolutely unnecessary and irrelevant. But I don't know that for sure. Bottom line is it was removed in November. Then we come into the new year, and once FOSUM and the medical group once again created a storm on the media. And if you look back, all of those news stories hit on the same day. So they hit 4 networks at the exact same time with a very similar story, and they all ran on the same day to create as much buzz as they could on that particular day. In that moment, they also used their political ties to get to the health ministers, or at least a few of them, and really go after them and say, how could you let this happen? How could you let the chiropractic board cave to the pressure of the chiropractors and endanger children across Australia? The health ministers didn't even really know about this policy. They weren't a part of the initial creation of it. That was all the chiropractic board, but they got a lot of political pressure. There was a lot of news stations that were calling them, asking them why this happened. They didn't know anything about it. So their knee-jerk reaction was to say, well, wait, we'll put it back in place until we can figure out what's going on. So the policy was back in place, not because of the Chiro board, but because of the health ministers, and specifically the health minister in Victoria. So that's why the policy got put back in place. It was media pressure. There's still no evidence. There was nothing, no new complaints. There was nothing. It was media pressure and political pressure to the health ministers to reinstate the policy. Now, here's how this is supposed to play out. The health ministers are meeting this month. It's supposed to be the end of this month. I haven't heard when that's happening. It might be the beginning of next month. And they have to unanimously agree that this policy needs to be reinstated. We are also hearing that they are talking about expanding it to 12 and under rather than 2 and under. I personally do not believe that's going to happen, because if they did that, that's going to create quite a storm from the general public. And right now they're only hearing whining from chiropractors. But if they start telling parents that 12 and under cannot go to a chiropractor to receive an adjustment, whether it's high velocity, low amplitude or not, you're going to get a different type of an uprising. So I don't think they're that dumb to do that. Remember, health ministers are political figures. They're elected in. So I don't see that happening. But I know the medics are pushing for that. That's been put on the table. But they have to meet and unanimously agree for that policy to stand. Right now, it's an interim policy. I know the ACA is working with 2 of the health ministers. We have a relationship with one of them. I do not believe they're going to get a unanimous decision. The evidence has been laid out very clearly to those that are willing to listen, to see that this is just a turf war and it's just slander, but I don't know. So I believe it's going to get removed here in the next month or so, because the health ministers will not get a unanimous decision. If I'm wrong, and the political pull of FOSUM and these other organizations is stronger than I believe it is, and they keep the policy in place, our lawsuit will switch from a restraint of trade and go immediately into a cease and desist and go after the government for creating policy without evidence. Now, to be clear of what's being said, which this is even more infuriating than them stating that there's harm, they're now coming back and saying that it isn't an issue of that there's evidence of hurting children. It's that there's no evidence of benefit. And so therefore, because there's no evidence of benefit, they're creating a policy to stop us from doing it. Now, I know you're saying the same profanity that I say when I even hear myself saying this, because if that's really how they're going to start measuring healthcare, then 90% of the medical world needs to stop, because there's not evidence to show efficacy and improvement with 90% of the procedures that are done in the allopathic world. So again, our lawsuit, there's part of me that hopes they do keep it in place, because it gives us a lot more, ammunition to be able to go and beat the hell out of them. I don't believe that's going to happen, but if it stays the 2 and under, our lawsuit will go immediately. We're already prepared because we've been working on it for the last year. It's just now we're going after the policy itself rather than the meaning for it, because if they do remove it, we are still going to do a lawsuit, but it's not quite as aggressive because they did remove the policy, but we're going after the fact that they did it at all so that we can stop things from like this from happening in the future. But if they keep it in place, then it's all hands on deck and we're just going to go and beat the hell out of them. If they add the 12 and under, again, that changes the lawsuit even more. Again, I can't see that happening, but we're preparing in case it does. Then all that does is add a little bit more piss and vinegar to our lawsuit, because that's just asinine. And we will rally our patients on behalf of that as well. So that's how this thing's supposed to play out. We should know within the next month and a half what the health ministers are going to do. I will tell you, as I said earlier, I'm talking with the ACA, letting them know what we're doing, figuring out what they're doing. If you're a member of the ACA, you should have received a letter template of them asking you to sign it and send it to your health minister, whatever state that you're in. I am strongly encouraging you to do that. I don't care what your opinion is of the ACA. I understand there's love and hate. I know there's history there. I don't really have a comment about any of that, and I don't really care about the past. I care about right now and what we're doing to change and influence the future. That letter is, and honestly, it doesn't even matter what the letter says. It's that we need the volume. And you're going to hear that throughout this presentation over and over and over again about the importance of volume and the organization. This is the number one reason we get stepped on all the time, is because we're so segmented. And that has to change. If you're tired of being treated this way, we have to organize. Now, I'm not asking you to organize around a technique. I'm not asking you to organize around a philosophy. I'm not asking you to organize around a practice ideal. I'm asking you to organize around the idea that you're tired of being the redheaded stepchild of healthcare, and you're ready to be taken seriously, and you're ready for someone to go and start knocking people out with the truth of what chiropractic can do. And that's exactly what we're trying to do, but it's very hard to do when only 600 of you are willing to go with us, right? There's 6,600 chiropractors across all of Australia. It's not very, impressive to say we represent 600. Like we've got to get to that 3,000 to 4,000 number to be able to really swing our weight around when we're writing letters and when we're doing lawsuits and things of that nature. It's not just economic, it's also representation. It's that organization that makes a difference. So I need you to send those letters in. If you're not a member of the ACA, I'm strongly encouraging you to become one. Again, I don't care about the history. I'm telling you, as of right now and the way that things are going to be working moving forward, they're your advocacy arm. They're the ones that have the relationships with the Chiro board and with Opera and with Guild and all of those groups. We're the tip of the spear. We're your special forces that will come in, beat the hell out of whatever we've got to beat the hell out of, and then get out. We're not your representation. That's the ACA. I promise you the leadership right now, and as long as we're acting in Australia, the ACA will do their job. They have the right people in leadership now. Their current CEO is the right guy at the right time. Their current president is the right guy at the right time. And they are doing the work that they need to do. But you need to see them as your advocacy political arm, which means they're never going to be writing in black and white. Their job's to play in the gray, because that's what you do with policy. That's what you do in politics, which I know has frustrated many of you over the last few decades. We are the ones that paint in black and white. It's a yes or no answer from us. But we need an organization to play in the gray, because that's how we get information. That's how we build relationships. So when dumb things like this policy happens, they immediately have an in. I don't have that in. They're not going to talk to me. So, but we need to be having those conversations, and they need to happen regularly. So I'm off my pitch, but if you're not a member of the ACA, I strongly recommend you do it. But if you get an access to those letters, send them in to your health ministers, please, as soon as possible. We need volume going to them, letting them know that this policy is ridiculous. So that is what's going on now. We'll know in the next month and a half where that's going to lie. That'll direct where our lawsuit goes. But we will be putting in a lawsuit no matter what in the beginning of the year. Now, let me give you a strategy of why that lawsuit. I'm not doing the lawsuit. If they keep the policy in place, I'm adamant we will win, and it's going to be a very direct lawsuit. If they remove the policy, which is what they should do, I don't know that I'm going to win. I'm going to do it because I want it to hurt a little bit, but I'm doing the lawsuit to make it newsworthy because of phase 2 of what we're doing. When I was just over in Australia, I started meeting with PR firms. We're interviewing PR firms that specialize in crisis management. We want to hire a PR firm to actually document and create and roll out a media messaging model to tell the story of how chiropractic has been targeted specifically in this arena of pediatric chiropractic. We believe that we can be more successful than they've been using the media, but because we have truth. We're not spreading lies and misinformation. We're going directly to the source. We're speaking the truth, but we're going to use the same strategy. So the lawsuit makes it newsworthy for our PR firm to be able to go in and get media interviews, to be able to get journalists to write stories, and we're going to tell the other side of the story. And we're going to do it very aggressively. Not only are we going to tell our story, but we're going to be naming the individuals that have been lying to the general public and abusing their influence for their own personal gain, and put some pressure on these individuals to really highlight FOSM and how they have nothing to do with the safety and efficacy of care for Australians, but they're just trying to perpetuate their own methodology and revenue streams by lying about anything else that could be a danger to their way of life. This media program is really going to be very detailed, very entailed to hit all forms of media, and to do it for a really a long period of time, to be able to use, again, the same method that they've been using against us for us. Now, I want to be very clear. What the PR firm is not going to do is go out and tell the story of chiropractic, because I will never be a part of that, because that's where we're going to start dividing chiropractors, because we don't all agree on what chiropractic is. The job they're doing is to specifically tell the story of the attack on pediatrics throughout Australia and make sure that the Safer Care of Victoria story is told about how important that we got 27 to 29,000 responses with a 99.7% favorability, even though the question was asked in a way to get nothing but slander. Like, these are stories that have never been told from that work that has been done, and it's going to be told in this media campaign. So I've made everybody aware of this. Guild is aware of what we're doing. ACA is aware of what we're doing. This group is aware of what we're doing. I had the privilege of sitting down and meeting with a few of the board members to really lay out what the plan is and strategy is. All of that's going to kick off. My goal is to have whatever we're doing with the lawsuit determined in October, to have the PR firm that we're going to be work with retained. And then the first of the year, all of this stuff launches. So that is the plan as of right now in the pediatric arena. Now, here's my shameless plug, if it even is a shameless plug. This only works if you guys help create momentum behind it. So our push to get people connected to us, yes, there's an economic component because we're probably going to spend $250,000 with this PR firm doing it. It's not cheap to do it right. So yes, I would love people connected to us and giving us the $50 a month because it helps us do that. Everybody doing a little bit makes all of this stuff affordable. But aside from the economics, I need to be able to share with you when we launch something with the PR. I want to be able to share it with thousands of chiropractors so that you guys are a part of it. You're helping to be that conduit in which it gets out. We want to be able to have flyers and things, QR code sheets for you to be able to put on your front desk that doesn't put you in the spotlight of badgering or spreading misinformation, but your people can scan the QR code and they're getting some video that's telling the story of why the media is talking about chiropractic the way they are, right? So it's not you standing on the corner putting crosshairs on your back, but you're helping us to spread the message in ways that we could never do it on our own. Again, it's the volume. It's having access to thousands of chiropractors. So when we need you to go left, you all go left. When we need you to go right, you all go right. That is the missing link to the power of chiropractic representing itself and beating the hell out of these people that have been targeting us for decades. So being connected to us helps you stay connected to this mission where you're getting information real time. If you're already connected to us and you're on this video, thank you very much. But I'm going to ask you to send this recording. We'll have this recording available to send it to people that aren't connected to us because we're at 600 in Australia and we need to be at 4,000. So it's volume. We have the plan. We have the team. What I don't have is the soldiers. And so I'm asking you guys to buy into what's being done here, why it's being done the way that it's being done, and us as a profession, probably for the first time in history, come together for a long-term project to defend the rights of ourselves and our ability to treat the general public. So that's my shameless plug. I'm done with it. Now, I do want to talk a little bit about what we're doing with the censorship stuff as well, because it kind of feeds into this pediatric issue, because that's one of the number one things that APRA gets triggered by is when chiropractors say anything about treating children. When we started digging into this censorship issue, it was really a matter of, was the language itself in the policy the problem, or was it the interpretation of that policy the problem? So we had our attorneys really scour APRA, scour the chiropractic code, and really look at it and see, was this going to be a political process that we had to change the actual policy itself, or was this going to be a legal issue where we needed to correct the way that they're interpreting it? After they spent a number of months really scouring and looking at that policy, it came back that the policy itself isn't that bad. It's the way that it's being interpreted, which was I assumed that anyway, but it was nice to have the legal team validate that. So that's when we launched Operation Free Speech. If that rings a bell with you, we've been trying to push this for about a year now. And Operation Free Speech is giving you guys material that we know we can support, that fit within the guidelines of APRA. And I know everyone gets really frustrated. The marketing rules apply to all healthcare, not just chiropractors. But it seems the chiropractic board is far more aggressive to enforce it than other boards. And that's why you still see other groups maybe using quasi testimonials or making claims and they're able to do it, it's because their boards aren't enforcing it to the level that the Chiro board is. I don't have an answer for why they're so hung up on this. I don't know if it's a job security thing. I don't know why, but it does seem that they're far more aggressive in enforcing their interpretation of the policy than any other specialty. But nonetheless, when we were looking at it, we realized we actually have to force the Chiro board to interpret it the right way. And the only way to do that was to encourage you guys to start marketing appropriately. And when I say appropriately, I mean in concert with the policy, knowing that opera was going to have an issue or the board was going to have an issue, and then defend it. So I needed you to do something that they were going to say you can't do so that we can defend it. And I know that's annoying. I know everyone would much rather us just fix it so that you don't have to get a letter from them and deal with all of that. But that's unfortunately not how this process works. The only way to retrain them is to have them say you can't do it, and then us come back and say, yes, they can, and win a bunch of those. So eventually they stop saying you can't. So I know that's a very juvenile way to explain it, but it's a lot like raising a child. You know, you got to slap their hand a number of times before they stop reaching for it. And that is unfortunately how this process needs to be won. I can't file lawsuits. The only way I can file lawsuits is if they continue to enforce something when they don't have the right to do that. And as a matter of fact, we are in a situation right now that we are having to go to an appeal and actually do a suit on a chiropractor that has a widget that he's just grabbing his Google testimonials and putting them on his website. So it's kind of a mirror copy of whatever Google reviews has, and it's on the website. Well, Opera is saying that you cannot do that. That is using testimonials. We disagree. It wasn't solicited. Even if there's a bad review, it's going to be on his website because he cannot control what's on Google. So it is not using testimonials, and it is not advertising. And from our perspective and from a legal perspective. So we are going into the next step. Opera basically just sent their last letter and said, we don't care. You can't do it. Those are the things that trigger cases. And so now we are doing an actual case to hold Opera accountable because they're wrong. They have no substantiation for their interpretation of that policy. We've provided a number of pieces of information to support our position. They don't care. They're just trying to muscle it through, and we're not going to let them do it. So that's why we need you guys doing these things. If we lose, then we just take it down and it's no harm, no foul. But we need thousands of people pushing that envelope. So we have recommended that you go to Dr. Heidi Havek's website and anything that's on her website, anything that trips your trigger, anything that excites you from what you read on there. Here's a perfect example of something Dr. Havek just put out over the last month. They just published a new case, or a new study rather, that says that if you adjust a segment that isn't subluxated or a segment that doesn't have instability, and maybe you cause a cavitation, but you're just racking and cracking, it does not stimulate the prefrontal cortex. But if you're adjusting a segment that actually is subluxated or has segmental instability, that it does trigger, or it does influence the prefrontal cortex, which is where all the magic happens. That's an important study to differentiate why it's important to go to a chiropractor versus a physio versus, you know, any other type of person that claims that they do adjustments, because they're not looking, they're not trained to identify where there really is instability in a segment. So therefore, they're just adjusting anything. And it may not, and it does not have the same effect based on this study. Chiropractors know how to identify those areas and treat them appropriately, therefore causing that stimulation to the prefrontal cortex. See, now that's something that you need to put out that Opera would probably have a problem with because they don't know that that study exists. Then when we defend it, we show them the study and say, this does comply with the policy. This is going to stay on our website and on our social media channels. So hopefully that helps you understand how that process works, right? So anything from Dr. Havek's site. If you're connected with the ACA as well, we brought over an organization called the Foundation for Chiropractic Progress. It is a United States organization, but it's basically the marketing arm for chiropractic in the United States. And we're trying to get them around the world. They have just a litany of information that is just fantastic about substantiating the effects of chiropractic and all this great stuff. And everything that they've produced is sourceable as well, which makes it compliant with the code. So anything from that website. And if you're a member of the ACA, you're already a member of the foundation. So you just need to contact the ACA to figure out how to log in and get that information. That website is www.f4cp.org. So f4cp.org is that website. And I'll put it in the chat feature here in a second. The last site that I recommend you go to that you can pull anything from is the New Zealand Chiropractic Association created a public-facing website that, in my opinion, is one of the best sites that I've seen put together for chiropractic that does such a phenomenal job of telling the story. That website is chiropractic.org.nz. Chiropractic.org.nz. You can pull anything from that and put it on your social channels or your website because it's all sourceable. So I am from my tour that I just came back from, I was able to connect with somebody that is currently building a machine to be able to give you approved content to make it even easier so you don't have to go to websites, pull stuff out, create the meme, and then send it out. So I refuse to do it because I'm not a marketing company and I don't want to blur the lines of what we do. But I did find somebody that hopefully I'll be able to share with everybody in the next couple of months that will just have all of that stuff done for you, and you can just grab content and it's already ready to go. I have no idea what he's going to charge for it. I know it's not going to be very much, but that's going to be available here before too long to make it even easier for you guys to grab things and put it out. Obviously, a good portion of the material is going to be pediatric related because I really want to push that button right now. And I want all over the airwaves the truth about chiropractic with pediatrics. It will help with our lawsuit. It'll help with the media campaign and all of that stuff. So I'm really wanting thousands of chiropractors putting this information out because it's sourceable, it's evidence-based, and it's going to give us more ammunition to be able to push forward with our lawsuit and our media campaign. So those are the two major strategies of what we're doing. Again, it only works with volume. If we have one or two chiropractors that follow through, they're going to pick them off. They've already done that. We've had a few chiropractors in Australia that have stood up and they have deregistered them. And it's easy to do it when it's one or two. But if we had 4,000 chiropractors going in one direction at the same time, not one direction on how you're practicing or what you believe about chiropractic, meaning that we're all going in one direction. Anytime they come after us, we swarm and we beat the hell out of them. That's been happening in other specialties for decades. And that's why they get away with what they get away with. We're the only ones that refuse to organize. So we've created an organization that allows it to organize without you going bankrupt, without you having to put crosshairs on your back, without have you going to a bunch of seminars. Everything we do, we bring to you. Every other week, you get a video telling you what's going on in Australia, real time, what's happening. Anytime we create anything, it gets sent to you and put in a way for you to use it automatically. So it's not, I just don't understand why I can't get chiropractors to see this image. There is such an opportunity in Australia, but if we don't do this, if we don't organize, you guys are going to continue to be picked off one by one. And things like them changing the 2 and under to 12 and under is going to happen because we're not organized and because it's easy to pick us off. So I'm asking you guys, whatever the hang up is to stop you from organizing with your fellow chiropractor, no matter whether they're pediatric focused or not, there is so much strength in this profession if we start coming together. And that's ultimately what needs to happen. So that's my pitch. There's a couple questions that have come in. Now's your time to ask questions. Dr. Keel, if there's things that I missed that you want me to cover, I'm going to come to you in a second. But I'm going to answer this first question, but please use the Q&A feature on the bottom of your screen if you have questions. But I'll start digging into these. How will the trigger of an investigation due to intentional advertising, as per your explanation, affect our registration as we are being investigated? This is from a personal perspective for someone who is in a complicated family court case. So the way that this goes down very easily is you're going to get a letter from OPRA or the board. Honestly, I don't remember who the letter actually comes from. And they're going to cite. So what they have is they have like a robot that just goes and starts scouring websites and social media channels. And then it finds these areas that they feel are in violation of the policy. You'll get a letter that says the below areas we feel are a violation of policy. You have two choices. You can either respond and explain them, or you can take them down. So immediately when you receive that letter, you need to contact us. I will get our legal team and contact you, and together they will go through your site and we will have a conversation of, okay, yeah, that one's probably needs to be pulled because that one's not okay, or this one's totally fine, leave it up. And then a letter goes back to Opera, which we will help you write, but you will send it, goes back to Opera and says, okay, we've taken these down, or really what it says is, we've complied with your request, and it requires them to go back and look. And if they see it again and say, well, this one's still on there, then we reply back and say, well, that's not a violation of the policy. Here's all the evidence, so on and so forth. And then it goes through a process of working with them. To date, we've been successful in 29 of those, where we have pulled some things off because the office did go a little bit too aggressive. But we've maintained a number of things, and all of those, by the end of it, Opera has said, okay. So we are successful with this process. This is not an issue of where you're going to get deregistered or a massive fine. The only way that happens is if you just ignore it completely and you don't even respond back to them, then there are fines and a threat of deregistration. But we know how to do this process where you're following your rights. If at the end of the process, they just put their arms down or fold their arms and say, no, you have to take it down, that's when we talk to you and say, do you want to go further? We're willing to take this further. We believe we have a good argument. But if you're like, you know what, Baron, I really don't, I don't care enough to get that far into it, then we say, okay, let's take it down. We'll send a letter to Opera and the thing goes away. So it's the reason we're asking you to do this is because you're not going to get deregistered. You're not going to get a gigantic fine. Those things only happen when you just pretty much flip them off and go your own way and ignore the process. We're going to be working within the process of your rights in the investigation. So there is no real threat of you being deregistered or having any major fine. And as I said, we've been successful in 29 of these already. My goal is to have thousands of them, because then Opera will stop sending these letters as frequently because they lose every time they do it. And it's a waste of their time and money as well. It says, I work in a clinic that is owned by a non-chiropractor. Who will be the citation be against in the instance? Yeah, it'll be you, because you're the doctor. The policy, I mean, the clinic would be the fine, I suppose, would be the clinics if there was a fine, but you would get deregistered because you're the healthcare provider. And that's where the policy comes from. It comes from an idea that you're abusing your role as a healthcare provider to influence the patient with misinformation, even though we know it's not, but that's their perception. So you would be involved in that as well. Probably not the fine, because the fine would go to the clinic because it's the clinic's website, clinic social media, but your registration as the chiropractor would be involved in that as well. Will it show up on our registration certificate? No. The only way it'll show up on your registration certificate is if you are somehow fined or they put you on probation or something of that nature. But just receiving the letter doesn't show up anywhere, because the initial letter is more of a, we found this, we believe this violates. Can you either take it down or can you explain? So you're not guilty when you receive that letter. And then there's more than one doctor in the practice. So I'm assuming that's coming from the question about the non-chiro owning it. Yeah, if the individual doctor isn't, then all doctors in that office could be involved in that then, because it's representing every single chiropractor rather than naming one individual one. But please don't be scared. Listen, I know I'm a crazy American, and I know that we like to go against the grain and we love fighting and, you know, don't tread on me, right? I mean, that's part of our slogan with an organization. I know that is our, you know, the root of our organization and our country. And I know that's not the case there. You guys are still very British influenced, which is you don't question the king. And I get it. But I would never ask you to put your registration in jeopardy. I wouldn't. I promise you. The reason we chose to go about this the way that we did is because there's a very, very, very low risk of any real penalty to the chiropractor, but there's a lot of high opportunity to create a better environment. So if I thought that this was any way getting people in trouble, I would never ask you to do it. But I can't do this without you. So we've developed a model that, again, low risk, but a high potential for a changed environment. So please don't go into this being fearful that you're going to somehow get thrown in the brig, because you're not. That's not how this thing plays out. All right, those are the questions that are on the thing. Dr. Keel, anything that I've missed? Anything that you feel I need to cover?
Yeah, there's a couple of things I'd like you to talk more on. When you talked about the um, upcoming meeting of the health ministers,
Yes,
and the position is that if one of the seven health ministers decides the policy does not need to be maintained or can be removed, then it does so because they need a unanimous
correct.
situation. And from what you're saying, there's three health ministers that are at least listening to our profession.
That's
So
correct.
there's a reasonable um, possibility that it will be removed again. I foresee that there will be a concerted immediate media backlash.
Yes.
So how are we going to handle that?
Yeah, so that's part of why I'm trying to get the PR firm and a crisis management PR firm. Again, I can't understate how important that is. I don't think our profession always strategically goes about dealing with issues. We just grab whoever we know that's part of a family friend that does PR, and then we ask them to do stuff. And you really need, in this, we do the same thing with our attorneys. That's why we have so many of them, because they specialize in very specific things. So we're grabbing the right people that understand the right thing. So that's why I want to have the PR firm selected by October, because that's when I really think, because it always takes about a month or two for the media to catch up with decisions made, similar to the policy got removed in November, but the backlash didn't come until March, April. So we have a little bit of time, and I want that PR firm in place so that if that comes, we can immediately respond. We may not have our whole story built yet, but we can definitely respond to the backlash that will inevitably come if that policy is, well, I'm not speaking to Bean, but when that policy is removed.
And also, that underscores, I think, the importance of generating letters to health ministers from
Correct.
chiropractors and their patients to, because votes count, and that's what they listen to.
That they are, and that's what people need to understand. This current issue is political. The issue before was professional. That was just the board caving to pressure. That wasn't a political issue. That was media pressure, and that was professional pressure. This is political because of the health ministers, because they're elected officials, and they don't know anything about this issue whatsoever. They had to do something to get the pressure off them. They did what I would have done. Wait. Let me figure out what's going on. It's no different than if you had, 4 or 5 patients come to you and say your front desk double charged you. You're going to be like, whoa. Let me figure out what's going on, and then I'll get back to you. And that's exactly what the health ministers are doing. But that's the volume that I was talking about earlier, that we have to, and not volume that we're sending 25-page letters telling the whole story of chiropractic. It's just volume that there's a voter in their state that is not happy about you putting that interim policy in place. And the more of those that they get, it really is just a tally system. They just stack them up. And that's just a political system. And so, yes, that you're 100% right. That is why that volume is so important.
So yes, I encourage everyone to print off those ACA generated pro forma documents and get patients signing them and sending them in. The other thing I was hoping you might perhaps you're able to share a bit more about is what your discussions with Guild involved.
Yes. Actually, I just got a question in from someone on that as well. So this is perfect timing. So I've been talking with Guild since the COVID days, because they were telling people that they were not going to cover those that were not vaccinated because they were not following state laws. And we immediately got involved because that was a bunch of horse malarkey, because it wasn't a law, and yada, yada, yada. So I've been talking to them aggressively since that day. And believe it or not, I know everyone gets all upset because Guild is owned by pharmaceutical companies and we're such principled people, but with all due respect, you better not eat any commercialized product from the grocery store if you're going to be that principled, because everything you're eating comes from a damn pharmaceutical company in some respect. So I get it. I understand it, but they were very good. I was very pleased with the way that they communicated with us, the way that I was able to go to them, and how open they were. in that time, we started talking to them about the advertising policy as well. And I also started talking to them about a few other things that I'm not going to talk about on this particular video just because it'll open a can of worms, but you'll hear about it in the coming days. But they have been very receptive. They agree that the marketing policy in place is absolutely ridiculous. And they're tired of fighting it because that's a trivial thing for them. Like all those little things, every time they get contacted when a chiropractor receives them, they're annoyed with it as well because they know it's garbage, but they're not in a position to go about it the way that we are. And because that's not their job, right? Their job is just their PI coverage, so it's all about numbers for them, settling or whatever. And so most of the time when chiropractors go to Guild, even though Guild doesn't agree with it, they're going to tell you to remove this stuff because it's going to be less work. And I'm not knocking on them. You just have to understand the framework. That's how they are built. That's why our organization is so important and why we created it, because nobody was willing to do this dirty work that needs to be done. So that's not a hit on Guild. But we made them very aware what we were doing. We've told them about Operation Free Speech, and they're in full favor of it. So the question that I had come in that is in conjunction with yours, it says, do you work in conjunction with Guild? If we were to receive a letter, Guild would have been my first contact before. With this strategy, who would be the primary contact? So you need to let us know and let Guild know. But let Guild know that you're working with the CDC. So the only reason that's necessary is because if for whatever reason this escalates and something weird does happen, Guild will kick in and make sure and carry it the rest of the way. So if they did try to deregister you, or which again hasn't happened, and I hate even saying it because I don't want you to be fear-based on this, but if that were to happen, Guild would kick in. But Guild needs to be aware of it from the very beginning. So you just let Guild know, hey, I got this letter, but I'm working with the Chiropractic Defense Council. They're representing me in this, but we want you to be aware of it. So at least they can log it. And that way, if it does weirdly escalate, they're prepared. So they love us because we're mitigating some of their cost and risk, right? Because we're handling these the little nuanced things, and then they're there for the bigger things, which is, again, in my opinion, how this should operate. And so that's how you need to handle that situation. Now, Dr. Keel, let me also say, we've talked to them about the pediatric thing as well. That isn't so much them. I mean, it would be them, but the board has not enforced that policy since its inception, which was another reason why it needed to be removed. Why even have the policy there to give a public perception if you're not going to enforce it? And because I mean, the majority of chiropractors I talk to are like, it didn't change anything. We're still doing what we did before. The problem is we've just had to address it from a public perspective, because every time it becomes a media storm, patients will come in and be like, oh, really? There's not. Yeah. And they have to tell the story. So we've talked to Guild about what we're doing with that and how we're going after that. They are in support and fans of the PR campaign that we're doing as well. And they're also aware of the lawsuit. So I'm not saying they're our best friend and they're hook, line, and sinker a part of everything that's going on. I'm just a firm believer. The only way I'm going to create the organized profession that I believe we need to have is by making sure absolutely everyone is aware of what's being done, why it's being done, and what their role in it is. And so I've intentionally made it a point to make sure that everybody is aware, so that either I can learn if there's an objection or a perspective that I didn't realize. It helps me shape the plan. But at this point, ACA, Guild, all the other major organizations, I'm talking to the Innate Summit people that have a movement. I'm talking to a TRP that has consulting movement. I'm talking to everybody that I can, the Gondroids, everybody that I can, so that everyone knows what we're doing, why we're doing it. And so that there should, and I've yet to have an objection. Everyone thinks it's great, but I'm not getting that viral response of people getting connected to us so that we can actually do the work. And that's why I'm trying to do as many of these webinars and videos, and why I just did the tour of Australia, to try to get people to get excited about this, because this is very exciting. And this is one thing that we do as humans, I suppose. Conflict is not a bad thing. Crisis is not always bad. It's an opportunity. These things spur us to do things we would have otherwise never done. And so it's up to us if this is going to be a horrible thing or this is going to be a great thing. Without them creating this stupid policy in 2019, it didn't give us an opportunity to get Safer Care Victoria, which you're going to turn around and say, well, Safer Care Victoria is a horrible document. No, it's a fantastic document that was misinterpreted and misused. So now we actually have evidence today to be able to show that 27 to 29,000 people said they've had an amazing experience. It's the best data that we've got all over the world. And that wouldn't have happened if that policy wouldn't have been created in 2019, right? So I always choose to look at this as God's bringing this into our lives because there's something to be learned. I'm supposed to grow from this, and it's preparing me for something better on the other side. So we've got to start looking at this opposition and these crisis moments as an opportunity for us to come together, as an opportunity for us to say enough is enough. I'm tired of being stepped on. We're going to organize and we're going to make a difference. And I'm doing my best to be that guy that forces everybody to the table to have an adult conversation. That's happening in Australia. I couldn't be happier with that part of it. But now I need everyone else to be willing to jump on board, to be the wind beneath our wings. No one knows if you're a contributor to our organization. We do not ever put out our list of contributors. So you are never going to have a crosshair on your back. So but you're the wind, right? You're the wind financially, and you're the wind by access to parts of Australia that we can't get into because you have connection to your patients, your community, and so on and so forth. So that's why this is structured the way that it is, and why Guild has been involved to the level that they have.
It's interesting because over 20 years ago, a number of us foresaw that there would be hard times ahead for pediatric chiropractic in Australia. And eventually in 2015, the ACCP was formed to try and bolster our profession against these sorts of attacks. And here they are.
Yeah.
But at the moment, we're busy putting out fires, which need to be fought. But one of the things that in the longer term concerns me in particular, and should concern everyone listening, is that we have been losing market share in Australia for a long time now because firstly, I'll put it bluntly, we're a cowed profession. We hide in our little practices. We don't want to put our heads up. We don't want to say anything. So we're pretty scared over here. And in the long term, we need to be on the front foot in the media and communicating with the public of Australia. And so I'm excited by the idea around a PR firm if they can take our message to the Australian public and get people more educated about chiropractors and care of children.
Yeah, well, I agree with you completely. And I want you to know that this game that we're trying to play, this strategy that we have, is foolproof. Like they're doing it against us. It's the same strategy they're using that's been so successful against us. And I understand the fear. I really do. You know, one of my favorite definitions of fear is that fear is a figment of your imagination, causing you to fear things that do not at present and may not ever exist. Danger is very real, but fear is a choice. And I love that definition because it applies to all of us. My fear of heights, I have an irrational fear of heights, and it's a figment of something that may not ever happen that is stopping me from doing things that otherwise I should be doing. And I sense that in chiropractic in a lot of countries that we work in because of the generational pressure that we've received. I mean, you look at people like Ian, you look at people like Simon Floriani, you look at these people that have literally been blasted, and, you know, and the average chiropractor looks at it and is like, I don't want that heat. You know, I just don't. But I'm telling you, it's not okay that we have a truth that we're afraid to tell the world. Like, this isn't about us. We had a generation of chiropractors that were willing to go to jail to make sure that we could practice today. And they literally did go to jail. And those little sons of guns were adjusting the prisoners and the guards in jail because they were so committed to this thing called chiropractic that they were willing to lose their freedom, willing to lose their clinics. You guys just did that with the issue of vaccines. A number of you said, I'm not getting vaccinated and I'm not shutting my clinic down. And you trusted us and you kept going and you survived because your belief was stronger than your fear. I'm asking you to do that again in this, even though your house is not in threat, even though your license isn't in threat. I'm asking you to choose to believe and have a passion bigger than the fear, because it's the only thing that will beat your fear is being passionate about something, which just drowns the fear out. So if you are wanting the world, and especially these children, We know the epidemic that is in place with childhood diseases because of the damn vaccines and because of the way that they're managed and tubes in their ears. And the allopathic model has no answer for understanding how the neurological system is supposed to be developed. The allopathic model does everything it can to destroy that natural process of that neurological development. And we know that. We have it. You guys experience it every day in your clinics. If your passion for getting the world to understand that isn't bigger than your fear of the attack you might get it, I exist as an organization so that you know you've got Big Brother, that if they come after you, you're not alone. That if you're part of this organization, I guarantee you, we proved it in COVID. We're proving it with the marketing stuff. We're going to continue to prove it with the things that we do. You are not alone. You don't have to fear that thing. So I agree with you, Dr. Keel. We have to get passionate again. We have to be so in love with chiropractic enough. This is our time in history. This is our generational challenge to stand up right now and love what we've been given and love it enough to give without concern about the retro impact to us. But the truth is, the retro impact is glorious. It's amazing. Your clinic's going to get busier. You're going to make more money. You're going to help more people. You're going to have more generational impact. And the fear of the irrational, the thing that may not and probably will never exist, is stopping you from being in that moment where you're fulfilling God's call on your life. And so I'm just asking us to be passionate about chiropractic again and let that over trump our fear. And we're doing what we can to create a reality that makes it easier for you to do that.
Correct. Perhaps you can share a direct contact with you, Baron, for people who wish to.
I'm going to put it in the chat.
Yeah, chat with you more before whatever they want to do would be great. So
let me. Baron Braden, would you mind if I just jump in for a second?
Please. Yes, go ahead.
Yeah. So during COVID, I'm going to give my personal account and my story. I connected with the CDC because of the vaccine mandates. And I know that a lot of people probably have a lot of difficulty trusting the CDC. Australians tend to trust very slowly. And I can say that thank God for them, because if it wasn't for the CDC, I would have really struggled. The police showed up at my practice. And they successfully handled my case within 24 hours, and I never heard from the police again. And I think that's an important story for everybody to be aware of, because people that I've spoken to who've heard of the CDC trust it more because now they know my story and they know what these guys did. So I'm one of, I think, 26, was it 26, Baron, in Australia that you successfully defended?
Oh no, we were 750 when it was COVID. It's 26 for the marketing. Yeah.
For the marketing.
Yeah.
So, it's something I think that everybody needs to be aware of, that if the CDC says they're going to do that and going to be there to support you, they will be. So that's just what I needed to say so that everyone was aware of what was going on. Thank you.
Well, thank you for that.
Thanks, Dan.
All right. So I have put in the chat feature, my email, our website, and I'm putting in here right now a direct link. If you're not currently connected to us, just click that link and that gets you connected to us. It's $33 a month. That converts to about 50 to 51, depending on the day and the exchange rate. But yeah, that's all there for you in the chat feature. Just click the chat thing below.
Good. Well, thank you, Baron, and thank you everyone for attending, but particularly Baron for putting aside the time to talk to us, but also for the huge effort you've put in coming over to Australia and trying to get chiropractors to defend themselves in Australia. And it, in a way, it's sad that it's an American who has to come over and do it, but we'll take it.
Well, I'm falling in love with your country, so I'm going to be an honorary Australian. I think I just got to work on the accent.
Excellent. And it appears that there's no further questions, so I think we can bring this evening to an end. And once again, thank you very much for your time, your effort, and your input.
Awesome. Well, thank you again, everyone, for your time. Again, grab my email in the chat. You are welcome to email me directly. And for those of you, I've gotten a couple people saying they've signed up. Thank you for your trust in us. I promise you we won't let you down. And be on the lookout. We've got some stuff coming up as we make some of these decisions. As soon as we find out what's going on with the health ministers and all of that, we'll convey all of that information. But thank you again, Dr. Keel and Dr. Leanne. Thank you so much for your trust in allowing me to speak with your tribe. And God bless you guys for doing what you do. And let's keep working together to make a difference for this world.
Thank you.
All right. God bless.